From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Leadership Series. After years of providing insight on the business of gaming, we decided we would invite some of the biggest names in the industry to give you, the viewer, a window into their management style, leadership lessons, and so much more. These are the most successful people in all of esports, and you now have a front row seat to learn from them, absorb their knowledge, and hopefully come away with a deeper understanding of what it takes to manage and lead successfully in the gaming world. On this episode, we have none other, and this is literally one of my favorite people in the whole world, none other than the CEO of GFuel, Cliff Morgan. GFuel, Cliff, it's safe to say the greatest energy drink in all of gaming. Is that fair to say?
I would certainly agree with that statement. I might be a little biased, yes.
But for those of you who maybe don't know about you, just let's start with telling our viewer a little bit about yourself and your background. Just a bit of the Cliff story.
Okay, so if we go way back in time, I got out of college and started my career on Wall Street. I was a retail stockbroker. I spent about 14 years, worked my way up into corporate finance. But during those 14 years, I got good at drinking expensive bottles of wine and having big meals with the, fancy clients, and gaining weight. And buying new suits every year, and to the point where in about 1999 or 2000, I was in really bad shape. I was pretty overweight. My dad had his first coronary in his 30s. So I started, as I got older, I started to feel more mortal and realized one day, hey, I got to get into shape and get my life together and learn how to eat and drink and exercise. And I got really into fitness. And in about 2004, I started a fitness company that basically made an all-natural testosterone booster for professional athletes. That was more out of my passion. By now, I was pretty healthy. I was into bodybuilding. I started taking martial arts. And in 2004, I started selling the product to GNC and vitamin shops. And by 2006, I had it was a small business. And I was probably naive at the time to think that it would be bigger, faster. But I sold my interest in my brokerage firm, and in 2006, I started running what was Gamma Labs full time. And it wasn't until 2012 that GFuel came out. So, from 2006 to 2012, I was a small, struggling business. I ultimately became good at digital marketing. And that was really the key to GFuel's success today was MySpace. So when we were doing business as Gamma Labs, we got good at digital marketing and building up a big digital presence and well-known brand awareness. But I was selling an all-natural testosterone booster and a pre-workout. So the market itself was limited. But we learned how to brand. And then we were fortunate to see the gaming space. And by fortunate, I mean I had a junior marketing guy that played competitive Halo. And he would tell me that he and his teammates would drink our pre-workout before competing. And my youngest son grew up playing Halo at all hours of the night, squatting up around the world, which was very new to me all the way back then. And I remember when Call of Duty was getting dropped, it was like Modern Warfare 2, it was December of 2012. And this was a real turning point for the business. We did a sampling at GameStop where you had to line up back then and wait for the disc. And we had girls go to 11 GameStops in Los Angeles and give out samples of our pre-workout. And this was in November of 2012. And overnight, the gaming community, just on Twitter and YouTube, they had great success with it. They were talking about it. They weren't getting paid to do it. And we started selling some product online. And it was immediate. We made an immediate shift and said, look, nobody cares about this market. It's growing. These people believe each other. Right? We had the heavyweight champ of the UFC. We were paying 6 figures a year to talk about our stuff. And it'd be a pay-per-view with 2 million people. And I would sell 6 bottles online. So it was rough and it was very competitive. And then all of a sudden we saw this market that was being neglected. And it gave us an opportunity to really kind of become part of a community that I never really believed would be this monumental today. But, we like to say GFuel is endemic in the world of esports because we grew up in the space. And, now we're a big business.
Was that the moment? Was that sort of outside the Call of Duty lineup there? The people waiting to buy the disc. Was that the moment where you decided, we have to pivot to gaming, completely? Was that the moment where, from a business standpoint, you made that pivot?
Absolutely. So the next morning, the young man that got me to do the Halo player that worked for me, his name was Mason. And when I woke up in the morning, we were trying to have no 0 days on internet sales. And every day we'd have between 1 and 3. And 2 months in a row, I just missed it. I had 2 0 days the month prior. So every business owner, especially a small business owner, wakes up, they have the first couple of things they look at every day: bank statement, how many transactions. So I was just hoping to see at least a 1, and I saw like a 200 and something. So I immediately thought it was fraud. But in 15 minutes, I was able to trace it all back to these Twitter posts from randoms without any big followers. And it was a light bulb went off, and it was that day. We went back and we reviewed all the contracts from the fighters, from the bodybuilders and the CrossFit guys, and said, who can we immediately get rid of on good terms and switch over? And my next call was to Mason, and I said, look, man, I need the phone number of all your buddies. And they were all YouTubers. And they weren't, esports wasn't a term, influencer marketing wasn't a term. These were guys that were either making videos of them sniping in Call of Duty or how to get past a different map. They were all making gaming videos. And we switched immediately. And we saw that, we only wanted to do business with the guys that liked our product. That was super important. So it was authentic and real. And that was it. Them telling other people about their good experiences legitimately and authentically is how we build a business. And fast forward to today, it's pretty much the same thing.
Cliff, one of the things I talk about a lot is, recognizing opportunity. And one of the questions I always ask is, how did you see this opportunity? And it sounds like part of the answer, and maybe this is a great lesson for the viewer, was like you were checking sales every single day, right? Even as the CEO of the company, this is something you were watching, not on a weekly basis or bi-weekly or monthly. It sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, was part of the key to jumping on that opportunity and seeing it in the first place, part of your ritual as a CEO, sort of what you did every single day?
That might be part of it, but I will say that I was early in 2 other areas, but wasn't really equipped to capitalize. One being the UFC and the other being the World Series of Poker. So I was big into the UFC and martial arts. It was my personal passion. I met Dana White at UFC 6 when most companies did not want to advertise at the UFC. They were still considering it barbaric. And so it was really early. And I remember, when the cost of the middle of the mat at a UFC pay-per-view was $30,000. And, I'm sure it's millions now. But so we were early there. But I just, with a testosterone booster in such a niche market, like I said, we had good branding, but I wasn't really equipped to capitalize on that. And in 2008 and 2009, I saw the poker in 2007, I saw the poker business and the viewership going up and people are playing online. So I signed a deal with the World Series of Poker, and I modified my testosterone booster to have some pomegranate extract in there, and I toned it down a little bit so it wasn't really a bodybuilder product. It was more of a male product. As aging men need more testosterone to maintain, memory and just good function, and for a lot of different health reasons. So I knew that the people at the World Series of Poker could use my product. The problem was they weren't health conscious. They didn't want to buy. This is until I got there. So we spent $400,000, which was a lot of money for us in 2008 and 9. And then we got to set up everything for 9 weeks. And I realized that, a lot of these guys are lazy. They rent those electric scooters to get from place to place, not because they're handicapped, just because they don't want to walk, usually so they can eat a jelly donut or something on their way through the casino. And it was not the environment for health and wellness. So I would say, I've always, I think, had the ability to see stuff as it's starting to trend, which has also helped out GFuel, with a lot of our collaborations and partnerships. But I couldn't capitalize on the first 2. So when we knew that esports or video gaming was the space I want to go in, I made an immediate pivot, cut as many ties as I could, and really made sure that I was able to capitalize with product on being early.
Yeah. In terms of gaming specifically, like, what do you think of the current state of the gaming industry? And specifically, like, as someone who's really good at seeing trends before they happen here, like, where do you think it's going as an industry? What do you see in terms of big trends for the future?
So that's interesting because of COVID, right? So now that we're clearly not past COVID, but let's call it a year into COVID. So had COVID not happened, I could see, 80,000 person stadiums all over the world at this point getting filled up for events. And truth be told, the poor viewership from the NFL last weekend just goes to show you that even in an environment where people are lacking input, they're still not that interested in old school, call it stick and ball sports, right? Or fossil fuel sports for that matter. I know like the Daytona is coming up, but this younger generation is definitely more interested in the gaming space. But I think the live events got set back years because of COVID, because now that people had to make adjustments to not going to an event, I think people are going to get used to not going to events and doing it digitally. So I don't think that slows the industry down. I think it slows esports down in terms of, big competitive events. But I think the well-established games like League of Legends and stuff like that, I don't think they'll see the negative impact. But I think for up-and-coming ones, and possibly even for the Call of Duty scene as well, I think that those live events, it's going to take some time for them to come back.
I'd love, Cliff, if you can tell me, like, share one thing that you think you did really right when you got involved in the gaming world, like something that you could pick out and say, we got this really right. We did something here that was really sort of better than everyone else. Like, is there something you could pick out as something that you did that was really quite smart or quite a bit better than anyone else at the time?
So I don't know if it was better than anyone else at the time, but I do remember when I hired the first 19 YouTubers, I had no experience in the space. I didn't realize that, some of these guys really had some clout in the space because they were like the OGs, the early guys in there. And we set up a corporate environment where every Monday at a certain time, everyone had to call in, all 19 of them. And myself and my partners would have a conference call with them every Monday. And we did this for like 5 or 6 weeks. And you can imagine we have secretaries tracing them guys down that aren't dialing in. It's pre-Zoom, so everybody was on the speakerphone, right? And after about 5 weeks of this, I had 1 or 2 guys that would communicate with me during the week in between calls. And I quickly realized, I got to pick these guys' brains and really understand how to operate, because my kids are their age. Not that I'm that old. And this is, not whatever, 2012, 2013, 2014, but I needed to listen to them. I needed to, in order to have a brand that's cool, you have to listen to cool people and they have to help you develop the brand, right? So I don't think that the position that we have and the image that we have inside of the gaming space could be replicated, because it's not really about money and it's not about connections. It's about that authenticity and belonging to that community. And I think that we got there because I listened to these guys on what was important. And they helped forge the business that it became. Remember the FaZe guys were 17. I think we just renewed for, I think it's like 7 years, I think that we just renewed for. I mean, so that we grew up with them in the space.
Yeah, I think no one has really got authenticity, even to this day, as right as you guys have. And I remember, I think the first time I discovered GFuel, even before you and I met, was I think one of your live streams where you were launching a new flavor, and you guys used to do these live streams, and it was like a bunch of guys on the couch with you, and it felt like you were at a party, like launching a new cool product. It felt really authentic. It was really entertaining, right? Even though it was a product launch. It felt like a really entertaining just live stream. And I've always felt like you guys get the authenticity just better than anyone else. On the flip side, Cliff, are there any mistakes or a single mistake that, you could share, mistake that you made, something you learned from maybe early on?
I mean, I think the biggest mistake that I made was probably the World Series of Poker, which I already talked about,
Okay.
you can't force things. And the other thing I learned is, it's really hard to be in a business where you have to educate people to buy something. And I think the best example of that is, we recently, it's been about a year, we went from just having the powders and the direct-to-consumer business into the 16-ounce energy cans that I'm drinking now. And about 5 years ago, this guy Jack joined me, who was my COO and now is my president. And he worked at a big beverage company prior. And we came out with a ready-to-drink because people were asking us for it. And behind the scenes, we were talking about, should it be in a resealable plastic bottle? And I will tell you that the biggest mistake I didn't make was listening to somebody that said, look, people are used to drinking energy drinks in a can. If you come out with an energy drink and it looks like a resealable bottle, and I was going to make the color, the same color as the GFuel, non-carbonated in a resealable plastic container. And he prevented me from going down that road. He said, people are used to buying energy drinks that are carbonated in a can. It's too early to try to reinvent. You could always expand your product line later, but you want something easily recognizable. And I believe that a lot of the success, we have a very high velocity with the cans in the stores we're in so far as we're continuing to expand. And I think that that's the biggest mistake I avoided.
Interesting. And what would you say, like, that's an interesting one because I think it applies to a lot of other things in esports, right? Which is if you have to educate your customer, then you have to do like 2 sales jobs, right? Like it's double the work almost.
Why is Fortnite the most spectated, stream? I mean, it might not be currently, but the reason it was so big was because it was entertaining and easy to understand. Yeah. Right. I mean, if you watch somebody play Rainbow Six, if you don't know how to play, even CSGO, very fast moving games, if you don't know what's happening, the people that watch are only the people that play it and understand.
Yeah. Cliff, like a lot of people who are going to be on this series, you've had big success outside of gaming and esports as well, right? And I think it's interesting to ask someone like you, like, do you see differences between business in general and the business of gaming? Like, is there anything that is specific about the business of gaming that maybe you didn't run into in your career outside of it?
In the last, 12 to 36 months, right, this has become such a hot sector that I see a lot of, and I know that you are personally angel investing, doing VC stuff. So the number of deals never surprises me in terms of people that are shopping deals. But it does surprise me that some business plans that aren't really that smart, people want to be in this space. And from an investor point of view and from an employee point of view. So people are trying to start up businesses that I don't necessarily think even belong here, have a real business plan, but yet people are putting money into what looks like a good presentation, which is a little worrisome to me. And it also drives up some of the prices. And we have, I obviously hire influencers. It's the lifeblood of my business. But if there are people that are willing to overpay them, then they should go with the people that are willing to overpay them, but they should know that that's not going to last. So, I pride myself on really long-term relationships. PewDiePie, FaZe, Roman Atwood, we renew these deals year after year after year. And, people call them partnerships, but it's not really a partnership unless both sides are doing well, right? And you can tell who's doing well when they renew. So it's a little scary to see so many baseless things come into the space, but there are a lot of good ones as well. But the amount of time these days it takes to cherry pick them, it becomes confusing. I think investors are getting confused. But I think it'll flatten out eventually. I think like every other business.
This is a good segue into sort of like we were talking very macro, sort of now the more micro view here. You talked about building long-term relationships as something that you pride yourself on. Is there anything that you could describe specifically about your management or leadership style in terms of day-to-day, how you run your business? Is there anything that you would sort of pick out as something you do or you focus on? Sure.
So now that I have a bunch of different department heads and, close to 200 employees, and so I have a group of executives below, and my management style is very different from everybody else's. But for me personally, I feel like in order to inspire greatness for my employees, I have to give them some space. So the newer they are, obviously, years ago, and many of these guys started with me the day after they graduated from college, and I was fortunate, and I molded them and taught them so they had no bad habits from corporate America, and I got them to do things my way. But now they all have their own staff under them, and I was never the guy that's going to stand behind my employees and crack a whip. Not to say they don't scream at people, because I used to scream a lot, but I don't want to watch you do everything and micromanage everything. I want to inspire you to do the best, because I've always felt that if you grind people down, that they will do their job, but they're not going to give you the best they can give you. Mm-hmm. And doesn't always work in every aspect. Some of my divisions have managers that do grind their guys, and because their division might need that kind of grinding. But overall, I can teach anything except motivation. I need to surround myself with people that are motivated. And if you're motivated to be successful, I can train you and work with you.
Also, great segue here in terms of being successful. A lot of the people watching this might be students, will be students. What do you think is required, or people just wanting to get into the industry, even if they're just graduated or something like that? What is required in your view, like required, capital R, for a person to really succeed in the esports industry today? Like, is there anything that you could pick out that says this person needs to have this if they really want to be successful?
They need the knowledge of the space, which unfortunately in a lot of things comes from Twitter, but it doesn't mean you got to go down a Twitter rabbit hole every day. But in order to have your finger on the pulse of the space, our community, the gaming community, uses Twitter as like one long continuous text message. So it's hard to take time out. And you also have to decipher between what's opinion and what's bogus and stuff like that. But you need to be current. I think being current on the space, and then people can teach you whatever division you're in. But I mean, you need to know what's going on. It's a rapidly evolving, and it will continue to do so.
Yeah. Knowing what you know today, like hindsight's always 20/20, Cliff, what would you have done differently when you started? Is there anything you would have changed in the beginning of GFuel in those early days?
No, I don't necessarily know if I would have done anything different. I think, we're pretty fortunate. It's hard to go backwards and say you would do something different when, you struggle for a bunch of years and now things are successful. So you're like, I don't want to change anything that would have screwed this up, right? So I don't know if I would have done anything different. I think as the business grows, certain things become more important. I definitely, you don't really know what your business is going to be when it grows up when you're early. So you just kind of want to, it's not so much about picking an identity. It's just about having an identity. Yeah. And now that we're a bigger business, we can be more careful. Like, I don't think that there are that many other businesses or any that I can think of that are focused on being as family friendly currently as we are. Right. And this wasn't really one of my goals early on. But as seeing some of my competitors in the energy drink and the activities that they promote outside of gaming, just real life stuff, I want people to feel that, they're going to be entertained, or their kids are going to be entertained if they come to any of our social media, that they won't see anything that they would find offensive. If they watch something on our streaming channel, they're going to get PG content. And I think that now that we're a more mature brand, we could be more particular in our identity. And I don't think you have that foresight when you're a small company. You just want the eyeballs. But it's always good to have in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I think intuitively people always think, well, you have to be really edgy or controversial if you want to get attention. And it sounds like, you guys didn't take that path, and the success has been there, right? And I think long term, it's probably a lot easier or a lot better to be family friendly than to be really, really kind of edgy and controversial.
So by the way, I hate the word controversial, and I tell my guys I never want to hear anybody say we just did something and it's controversy. Like, if it's a controversial point, our company doesn't have an opinion. I'm not looking to alienate anybody. I don't want controversy. Going all the way back. So that has been my personal feeling since inception. Even when we made testosterone boosters, Early on, I had an opportunity to do business with a guy that, there were Google articles about him taking growth hormone, and it was just some negative press. And my business back then was all about being all natural. And even though the guy was now against that and had kind of changed his public persona, I just felt like there are just too many athletes out there to choose from. I just didn't want to jump into anything that could potentially bring controversy to my brand. It's not what I've ever been about.
Yep. And I think you guys are really consistent there. Like anytime you tune into a streamer who's sponsored by GFuel even, right? Like, and I would argue that's pretty far separated from you, right? It's always very inclusive. It's always, always very authentic. There's nothing, you never go, oh my God, how did GFuel put their name on this, right? Like this is, I think, one of those keys to success is that the brand has never touched anything even remotely controversial. And I think that's a good thing.
I agree.
What advice would you give to a young person starting in the world of esports business, call it? Like if they're just starting out, what would be the advice you would give them?
I think that some people have a competitive advantage in the world of working remotely. So anybody that's coming into the industry now is probably not going to be showing up at an office. I used to believe, it's not even that it was a belief that, as we've grown, I have a bunch of employees that are off-site, and it's been that way because some of my artists are in Belgium or in the UK or, around the world. But the vast majority of my core guys came into the office every day until COVID. So a lot of my influencer managers were working remotely, and that's an important role because my influencers are like the lifeblood of the business, right? So the managers, for the most part, work remotely, and they were at a disadvantage in terms of they couldn't really form solid relationships or have their identity known through Slack messages. But once everybody went to working remotely and that changed, I think for some people that's an advantage. Some people are more introverted than extroverted. Some people do better or worse in an environment where all of a sudden they're the new guy in an office with 40 or 50 people. Now it's a little bit different. We have weekly Zooms and we add 1 or 2 people on every week. And it's just one more box on one more page of people to scroll through. We give them a quick shout out. They wave and everyone sees them in Slack. And it's just another addition, another name, So it is an interesting environment. But so if you're, I hate to use the expression try hard, but if you're out there and getting involved and mingling with other employees and showing ideas, I think that businesses are always looking for that good idea flow. And sometimes it's creative, sometimes it could be financial, better ways to do things, it could be manufacturing or supply chain. But I think everybody it's an equal playing field now. So I think this is a good time to be a try hard, make yourself known, work hard. And I think it's a good environment for new people to be a proving ground.
Cliff, I think it's such great advice. I think being a tryhard is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad word at all. Any last words of wisdom? Anything you would want to leave sort of my audience with in terms of, leadership lessons, management lessons, learning from all your years in esports and gaming? Any last words of wisdom?
Michael Milken, who I think you probably know, the former junk bond king, right? Most young people that are watching this won't know who he is. He is a very, very brilliant man. And I was fortunate enough to meet him a few times. And he said to me, and he knew I was a young, growing entrepreneur. He's actually how I got into GNC, but that's a different story altogether. He said to me, look, you don't need to be the smartest guy. You need to surround yourself with experts and smart people. And I've taken that to heart. I definitely, if most of the guys that work for me or a few of the guys that work for me, if I feel they're more intelligent than me, that's a good thing for me, right? They're working for me and they're using their brain for me. So if people have talent that you could bring to the table and they have brains that you can bring to the table, and long-term that's going to help your goal, take that help.
Not to be threatened by it. Because I think a lot of people who much less successful than you can be sometimes are threatened by intelligence around them. And you're a smart guy, Cliff. So I don't know if you have smarter people than you around you. That's impressive.
Listen, man, you can never always be the smartest guy in the room. That's just a fact, right? Yep. So I think that being and all. I mean, the other thing for me is naturally relationships. I think one of my personal skill sets is relationship management. I think I'm good at reading people. I think that came from the brokerage business, and I'm good at seeing things from both sides. Because, you know, like your parents told you there's your side, his side, and somewhere in the middle there's the truth, right? It's not so much about finding the truth. It's that people that see the same thing every day have one opinion and then, you know, or one view of a problem. And when there's some kind of a clash, you need to be able to really look at both sides, because you know about business negotiations are all about finding the least pain for both sides to come together. There's never going to be one person that walks away from a negotiation thinking like this was great. And, you know, they're both not going to think it was great. There's a meeting ground, right? And I think that you have to balance your employees and everything else by finding that medium daily.
I love it, Cliff. Thank you so much. That's our half hour here. Really appreciate it. For those of you listening, watching, make sure you go drink some GFuel. Come on. It's,
yes. Drinking some.
It's awesome stuff. There you go. And Cliff, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Always great seeing you, buddy.